Hey everyone, I'm just recording a brief, hopefully a brief, update on the mentoring agreements. So I'll do these every so often to send out the video, and this one will go to the apprentices, the mentors, and the SRAs. So I hope it is of some value. So when I go to talk about, I could barely get that sentence out. The purpose of today's session, just to review the mentoring agreements, explore learning from those agreements and invite your feedback. So that's the basic kind of attempt today. Really, when I'm talking to the SRAs and the teaching staff about, how we're finding things, because the apprentices will tell you how they are, I hope. I just really love working with the apprentices. They're a great group of people. There is huge amount of experience, skills, and understanding, as I've said here, but I'm writing these words. Not really sure it's getting across how we feel about it because you see enormous change really quick. That enthusiasm, the positive responses to new learning, it really is just a great pleasure. There are, of course, challenges for everybody, all getting used to each other, how things are done, the new learning for people, return to learning, sometimes after a long gap, assignments, trying to plow through assignments, getting your head around what's required for these things, timing, balancing work and life, and AOB, all sorts of other things kind of interfere or contribute to progress and learning. But overall, overwhelmingly positive experience for us, and I hope for the apprentices too. Our ethos, generally our kind of way approaching this, is that we all move forward together. No apprentice left behind, sort of a thing. And if you do feel that your apprentice is really struggling, reach out, talk to us. So assignments. Well, just general thing about assignments, first of all, just to kind of orientate to the expectations for the year. The first bit of the year is actually, quite demanding. We've had some feedback about that, and we're going to kind of stretch the course out a little bit more next year, after listening to what the apprentices have to say. So more news on that in due course. So the first kind of quite compact module that people do is transitions into social work. There's two elements that we're waiting for some of the second elements to come in, but all told, it's looking good. The next thing or the next assignment is due because the second module is foundational skills and knowledge, development across the lifespan, human growth and development, surprise, surprise, absolutely essential for social work, whatever part of social work that you're working in. They'll be working on that assignment now, and that will be due on the 15th of January. So quite a lot of emphasis and focus on that at the minute. Next year, they'll start Introduction to Law, Policy and Ethics. And as we go, I'll tell you a little bit more about those modules. I don't tend to focus on those so much in these feedback videos because this is really about the last one there, on the job learning, because that is, as we say, ongoing. So just that off the job learning, in class teaching. There's a little bit of the teaching staff there. They're the people who mainly do the teaching, but there's a lot of other people involved as well. So they had to do your journey into social work, always real interesting to kind of read. And some of those themes will come up later on in this recording because they find their way into the mentoring agreements. The next thing they have to do is a process recording of an interaction or practice moment with a person of lived experience of social work. Oh, dear me, and you kind of ran out of breath saying that. But again, all our assignments really are kind of dedicated to try to develop practice skills in the real world that are directly applicable to social work practice and learning. And a lot of the apprentices are already telling us that they're applying some of the learning in class in the workplace. And that's the kind of ideal scenario, really. So if just kind of try a reminder, I suppose, that they're apprentices throughout the year, the whole year. It's not kind of like you do term time in April or May, you stop learning. No, we're apprentices the whole year. And that means that they have that one day a week dedicated to learning throughout the year. So they are progressing those elements. The journey into social work, which they've done on another module, also becomes part of their portfolio, but they've done that. The learning needs and opportunities, that's what we're doing now. It's their first go at it, and you'll have a chance to review that later on in the year. They've been doing direct observations. I'll feedback on them probably before Christmas, but we'll see how we go. And that is always attached to feedback from a person with lived experience of practice or social work. There is an agency description assignment that's due on the 11th December, which of course is next week. And when I've had a look at those and mark and feedback, I'll send you out a little video about that too. There will be a review of the mentoring agreement, and that'll generally happen in January. It's kind of due to be completed at the end of January, and that'll be exercising people. But there's a couple of hints and tips in this little video about how you might approach that. More to come. And at the end of the year, really there's a reflection and practice. At the start of June, as you can see, that's where they submit their summative or graded assignment for this module. So you get to build it up over a year, essentially kind of like coursework really in other qualifications, and that's finished with a Viva, which is a brief live presentation about progress and development over the year. So let's do the feedback and let's see what I have to say about the mentoring agreements in particular. So kind of like really there's 4 sections of the mentoring agreement, a little bit of general feedback, just really, they're really good, extremely interesting, obviously very well worthwhile. And there's a couple of things you can do, as we'll see, that will kind of improve those, but they're already pretty good. I already see a lot of really positive things. And then we'll work through getting to know each other, apprentices' strengths and learning needs, and the learning opportunities. So what I noticed, first of all, is a lot of people are using the social graces model and very effectively. I mean, it really does seem to, at least at times, generate a kind of quite in-depth conversation. I suppose what I would suggest is if you're finding yourself doing a very brief account, that it's not always clear who is writing that. It could be sometimes the apprentice, sometimes the mentor, and sometimes a more collaborative arrangement. Yeah, kind of flesh that out a little bit, put a little bit more detail in it. Those conversations are quite rich. The Mandela model has been used very effectively and several times in all sorts of different ways. That seems to work very well. Real life, some of you will be familiar with that. That's a kind of very helpful kind of little tool. I was kind of thinking, oh, well, I kind of add all these tools on. I thought, nah, Google it. It's pretty straightforward and simple. You don't need to be, having a PhD to do the tree of life. Simple tools are good tools. People use the PCF to structure that. That works quite well. Johari's window, again, another common tool in social work that you can Google if you like. Quite sophisticated tool, really, in some ways, but pays dividends and can be used over time. And generally just kind of an unstructured, informal conversation, which can work quite well. And 1 or 2 people have used the initial needs assessment that the apprentice has to complete before they actually come on the program. Learning styles, as in Honey and Mumford. Not everybody will like me saying this, but anyway, the evidence is very weak. It's based really on a sample of white, middle-aged American business managers. And you kind of think, is that going to work here? No, it turns out that even though it's not great, a lot of people still like it. So it doesn't actually do much harm or damage, but be careful that you give too much emphasis to it because, as I say, the evidence is not great. Reflective elements. Yes, there are quite a few reflective elements. So have a little look at what they are. So models seem to improve reflection, but that does happen in formal conversations as well. So to each their own. So I would definitely think this conversation is an investment if you kind of put the kind of foundation down correctly, you can build on it more effectively. Kind of things that people have talked about, this is just a kind of a selection, there's more to it than this, is of course about returning to learning or sometimes the first experience of higher education. Our relationships between the learner and mentor, just putting that on the table and exploring, it's quite important. Previous experiences of supervision, not always hugely positive, I have to say, but nonetheless, it's important to kind of make these things explicit. Then you have themes about spirituality and faith as drivers of why a person might want to do social work. There's a lot of other motivations, of course, and they sometimes overlap. People have had carer roles, experiences services, neurodiversity, all sorts of different kind of, how would I say, motivations to actually become a social worker. Friends, family, and community are quite often discussed. I love those discussions, they're really interesting. But also experiences, of course, of discrimination and prejudice, and how that has informed a person's kind of approach to those experiences, and also as a powerful sometimes driver for taking on social work. And of course, there's discussions about sexuality and relationships, and I probably should put children in there as well, because that's also been something that's come up in those discussions. So clearly all of that there is kind of showing us that you are getting to know each other. That is quite important. It's not always easy to tell who has written what. Mainly it seems to be the apprentice, but it can be a combination. But you can really tell when people have worked together. Sometimes people kind of each have their little bit. That works quite nice. They describe the other person. I'm definitely not saying you should do that, but it just kind of demonstrates there's lots of different ways to do this effectively. There isn't a kind of one size fits all. Quite often you're building on pre-existing relationships. The people rather already know each other, but they're kind of reframing the relationship and thinking, how is this going to be different? It's always good to see when power is explicitly discussed. Power isn't necessarily a bad or evil thing of itself, but if it is unstated and it isn't actually put on the table and has a tendency to work its way out in kind of strange ways, not always helpfully, so it's good to have an explicit discussion about that. Same with previous experiences of supervision. You know, all our experiences today are informed by our experiences yesterday, and our experiences of supervision no different, right? So if you've had like a bad experience of supervision before, do you know what I mean? Maybe that's worth talking about. Similarly, if you've had good experiences and you're able to talk about what works for you, then perhaps that's worth talking about too. Interesting discussions about class, people trying to work out what class am I? I thought I knew, but I'm not really too sure. So those are interesting. But if this part, getting to know each other of your mentoring agreement is short, maybe consider spending a little bit of time on that before the review in the new year. So the apprentice's strengths, if you've done getting to know you well, that tends to be quite well developed section. Just a little note to the apprentices, you know, this is about professional self-assessment. It's not about kind of blowing your own trumpet or being big-headed. It's just kind of trying to kind of make an objective as far as is possible. Self-assessment, right? What am I good at? What do I need to build on a little bit more? Modesty is not required. Oh, shucks, poor me. No, not really appropriate here. Good to note any additional learning needs and barriers. It might be dyslexia, it might be other things, it might be caring responsibilities, kind of some neurodiversity comes up here, all sorts of different things. If it's not there, why not? If appropriate, sometimes people just don't want to talk about this. I wonder. Is that going to have worth thinking about? And also nice to see a note about caseload or casework reduction. You know, you can't expect an apprentice to learn at 100% of their caseload, and that's just not going to work. So if it hasn't happened already, have that discussion and see what might be done about it. Recognize there's a real world out there, pressure and services and all that kind of thing. But you look after your apprentice will thrive. If you don't work so well. Anyway, so the learning opportunities in some respects is really quite important because you're going to be building on this over the 3 years, not just this year. They're generally very good and sometimes excellent. Often there's quite a few identified, meaning 10 or more. Now, I try not to put a number on these things, but really by the end of the year, this is the kind of thing I need to see, and you need to be building on them. I mean, basically, there's a ton of learning opportunities in each agency, regardless of the setting. So let's kind of pull them out because, in essence, you're building evidence in the portfolio for the end of the year. Quantity isn't everything. How these are written is important. And here's a couple of examples coming up. So these are quite nice examples. The reason being is it's quite clear what the intended learning outcome is. You know, so it's not just a task. It's what am I going to learn from this? So hospital visit, to understand process of reablement, rehab, step down and community discharge processes, quite a lot in there, but like it's clear intention of the learner. I'm in this part of the service and want to go there and learn more. To begin to identify relevant theories and apply these to work with service users or PNE, whatever the phrase you prefer is. And obviously we're trying to link theory to practice all the time, and mentors and apprentices and SRAs, have those discussions. Use and gather knowledge to intervene with individuals, families, and communities. That sounds like straight out of PCF. Anyway, undertake assessments of needs and case reviews as set out in the CARE Act 2014. So again, this is very targeted. I am going to do these things. And at this stage, having the ambition to do these things, just set that out, more likely to happen. And so, it's quite direct. This is what I intend to do, and the opportunity to shadow the MASH service to learn how referrals are screened and processed. And that might be somebody who was later on in the process and kind of wonder what happened back there. So, all these nice examples, very clear what the learning, intended learning outcome is. Okay, so it's good to kind of say that supervision, the prevent training and shadowing the social worker are learning opportunities, but it's not clear to me what you intend to learn. So that's the bit that we need a bit more of. It kind of makes it easier to track the evidence and to identify where further learning might be had. So yeah, if I see 20 of these, I'm kind of thinking, okay, they're all very good, but like, bit more detail really. And so you have an opportunity to kind of review these and perhaps draw out that kind of learning intention a little bit more in the new year. Sometimes there's nothing about quality, diversity, and inclusion, and that kind of makes me a little bit worried. You're thinking, hang on, you're a social worker, right? This is one of our main things. Do you know what I mean? It's our learning tool. And it also stops us kind of being discriminatory and biased ourselves in the very many ways that can be done. So, we'll give it a little thought. Is there something I could add there about that? And reflective supervision with the mentor is one of the most important learning opportunities that you're going to have. So let's have a little bit of something about that in there. I hope you don't feel I'm doing this, giving out to you kind of stuff, but I'm just trying to suggest ways that you might improve or develop the actual mentoring agreement. And you have time, so don't worry too much about that. So the last little bit is about PCF and timings of when things happen. So if you haven't aligned with the PCF, go back and do that and make sure that I try to do that sooner rather than later, really, because we're introducing a new set of standards that you're going to have to use, which is the apprenticeship standards in the new year. Now, we have a tool that will help you kind of align them. You don't have to make it up yourself, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like, here comes the next set. See if you can get to grips with PCF a little bit more if you haven't done so already. Try not to do PCF 1 to 9. I mean, really, you could make an argument for any piece of practice that, maybe there is all domains are met, but some are much more strongly met than others, right? Try to pick those out. And remember, we are working at readiness for direct practice or DP level throughout the year. Notice that BASWA have made their site members only. I'm kind of thinking, oh dear. So maybe one of the things I should do, he says, thinking on his feet, is to download those standards and put them on Canvas and make them available for you if either you are not a member of BASWA or you can't access the site for any reason. Task for Dermot. So timing, you can't do everything in the first year. Be fairly modest. Jacqueline often says we don't need tap dancing on the moon. This is RDP level. I have no doubt the apprentices are all going to be able to meet that level. But you know, it's much easier to make progress in incremental, modest steps than aiming too high, right? So just kind of bear that in mind. Um, Same time, it would be ongoing. People kind of say, "Oh, well, okay, ongoing is okay," but you know what I mean. Try to set reasonable time limits on when you will do things by, like that MASH visit or whatever, or go to the hospital. You know, that definitely can be timed, yeah, if you see what I mean. And some agreements do actually show forward planning over the course. Some people are thinking across the 3 years, and some people have actually completed the next section of the agreement, or at least started that already. But that's okay. It's not the end of the world, but you have time, so take your time. So just my little brief recap. For the review of the new year, have a little look again at working together, strengths, learning needs, and in particular, the learning opportunities. Learning opportunities you can build up over time, so they don't have to be perfect now. And really use the review as a time to celebrate and consolidate progress. I mean, sometimes when we're in new situations, we're kind of going, oh, what about this and that and the other, generate anxiety and so on and so forth. And sometimes we kind of lose sight of the fact that, hey, got on the course, I'm progressing through the course, you know, successfully did assignments, I've met all these various people, starting to get my head around it. Is that not worth celebrating? I think it very much is. As I said earlier, some people have started the next section already. You don't have to do this, not the end of the world, right? But, you know, take your time. Signing, actually not asking you to sign this off at this stage. We're asking you to sign it off at the end of the year. Perhaps we could sign it now. I don't know. But we haven't set up the documents like that. Next year, you'll sign it more frequently. But this year, it'll just be once towards the end of the year, and that'll be the mentor, the SRA, and the apprentice. Um, and get in touch. We do actually need to hear from you, and we like talking to you, and we like to hear what you have to say. That goes for everybody, basically, the mentors, the apprentices, the SRAs. If you have feedback, send it. You know, we've been getting feedback now for the past 4 years. And if you compare what the program looks like now to what it looked like when we started off, it is actually quite different. I can show you the evidence if you like, but we do listen to and act on feedback, and we welcome that. And I think really that's it for me. Get in touch. I suppose it's getting near the holidays. The first term is nearly completed, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. And take care. Bye.